Dave Galir, to Falchamore Rove, Gatara. This year marks the 40th anniversary of the 1981 hunger strike. Indeed, Michael Devine died in the prison hospital on this day, the 20th of August, 40 years ago. This year, the national commemoration was to be held in Derry. It was something that Republicans in the city were really looking forward to, welcoming you all here with open arms and warm hearts. Unfortunately, due to the ongoing public health considerations, the commemoration had to be cancelled. Actamid exactly Kayla is Sliella on Kidney occur our camaradeha, a fur bass or stock ocras, Jaha Planahan. So rather than gather here in our thousands to honour and celebrate the lives of Bobby, Frank, Raymond, Patsy, Joe, Martin, Kevin, Kieran, Tom and Mickey, and with them Michael Gahan and Frank Stagg, we will now remember them in this way. Is Kinsa go me la ella ogin. No doubt there will be another day sometime in the future, and we look forward to that. Today we also extend our continuing empathy and solidarity to the family of the hunger strikers. Tashiv and our Smincha Iganam Shaw. The courage and dedication of your loved ones, our friends and comrades, have been a guiding star over the decades. Their legacy and example continue to inspire us. We acknowledge the great love and bond you share. Only you and those who suffer such loss can ever truly understand the great sense of grief you carry. You all stood as one, unbowed and unbroken. They were political prisoners, and in that they prevailed. We are proud to call them our friends and comrades, and we will cherish their memory, Gujo. August Lakelia Mariner, Chiefy Mids, Erie Nagali. This is our tribute to them.
Thousands of Irish Republicans were imprisoned during the conflict, north and south, in English jails and further afield. All were political prisoners. All showed courage, dignity and a determination to maintain the integrity of the Republican struggle. And prisoners were central to that struggle. The events of the 1981 hunger strike brought the prisoners centre stage in the struggle when the eyes of the world were on Long Kesh. The hunger strikers, as well as the other prisoners in Long Kesh and Armagh and in prisons across Ireland and Britain, fought for their right to be treated as political prisoners. They refused all attempts by the British government to criminalise the prisoners and republicanism. These attempts began in 1976 when the British government withdrew political status for prisoners convicted of political offences and sought to treat them as criminals. This policy of criminalisation was immediately resisted by Republican prisoners. When Kieran Nugent was sentenced and imprisoned in September 1976, he rejected being labelled a criminal and he refused to wear the prison uniform, the very symbol of criminalisation, telling the screws that they'd have to nail it to his back. He refused to wear the clothes of a convict, instead choosing only to wear a blanket. With this brave act of defiance, he became the first blanket man and began the period of prison protest, which ultimately led to the hunger strikes. Soon other sentenced prisoners joined him on the blanket protest, and by the end of the year, more than 40 prisoners were on the blanket. They were joined on the protest for political recognition by the women in Armagh jail, who refused to carry out prison work. As a result, they were subjected to long hours in lockup, lost remission of their sentences, and they were subjected to a punitive regime. As Britain doubled down on its criminalisation policy, the resolve of the prisoners increased. Those on the blanket faced harsh conditions in that cold winter and faced a 24-hour lockup in their cells and were punished by having their furniture removed and being placed on a punishment diet regularly. They were also unable to receive visits from their families. As tensions rose, so too did the brutality of the screws, to the point where prisoners faced severe beatings whenever they left their cells. In March 1978, they began to refuse to leave their cells and, as a result, were unable to slop out. With prisoners unable to get rid of waste, they were forced to smear it on the walls of their cells, and so the No Wash protest began. Soon there were 300 prisoners on the blanket and No Wash protests, and the outside world began to take notice. In July 1978, the Archbishop of Armagh, Thomas O'Féin, visited Long Kesh and spoke of the inhumane conditions which he found there, comparing the conditions the prisoners were forced to live in with the slums of Calcutta. This brought even more attention to the prison protest, and in January 1980 the prisoners released a statement setting out their 5 demands in their campaign for political status. Soon the men in Long Kesh were joined on the No Wash protest by the female political prisoners in Armagh jail. As the protests escalated, the prisoners made the decision to put more pressure on the British government by embarking on a hunger strike in October 1980. 7 men stepped forward: Brendan Hughes, Tommy McKerney, Raymond McCartney, Tom McFeely, Sean McKenna, Leo Green and John Nixon. And they went on hunger strike for prisoners' 5 demands and political status.
My 6 comrades are prepared to go through this, and we are prepared to die to prove that we are special prisoners, and our 5 basic demands are just.
As the brave prisoners went on hunger strike, campaign groups sprang up across Ireland and internationally. People took to the streets in support of the prisoners and their demands. Across the world, the media spotlight was shone on Long Kesh and the prisoners' hunger strike and the brutality of Thatcher's policies in Ireland. The hunger strike continued for 53 days and ended when Sean McKenna was near death after proposals from the British government. These proposals turned out to be hollow, only serving to increase the resolve of the prisoners to continue their campaign for political status. As 1981 began, the prisoners in Long Kesh and Armagh were so relieved that no one had died on the first hunger strike, but also frustrated by the British government reneging on its proposals. But their determination to resist the criminalisation of their struggle was higher than ever. And the prisoners' leader, Bobby Sands, knew what had to be done. He knew a second hunger strike would be necessary, and that it would be a hunger strike to the death. On March the 1st, 1981, in his cell in Long Kesh, Bobby Sands began his hunger strike. Aware of what lay before him, of the possibility of his own death and the callous hostility of Thatcher's government, Bobby Sands was determined to stand by his comrades. Despite 5 years of hardship on the blanket protest, the No Wash protest and the daily brutality they faced from the screws, the prisoners were energised and got behind the protest. The female prisoners in Armagh also supported the hunger strike, continuing their no work protest and highlighting the prisoners' 5 demands. And they found support far beyond Long Kesh and Armagh. Nationalists were angered at the cold indifference of the British government and got behind the prisoners. People joined protest marches and vigils. They stood by the families of the hunger strikers. Just 5 days into Bobby Sands' hunger strike, the independent MP for Fermanagh South Tyrone, Frank Maguire, died, triggering a by-election, and after much debate, it was decided that Bobby Sands should stand for election. As the campaign got underway, Bobby Sands was joined on hunger strike by Francis Hughes, Raymond McCreish and Patsy O'Hara, and support grew for the prisoners. Following the by-election on the 9th of April, Bobby Sands was elected as a Member of Parliament.
Anti-H Block, Armagh, political prisoner, 30,000.
His election brought huge public attention to the hunger strike from across the world, and pressure mounted on the British government. But it cruelly refused to move. On the 5th of May, after 66 days on a hunger strike, Bobby Sands died. His death led to an outpouring of grief across Ireland, and in Belfast, his funeral was attended by more than 100,000 people. It also increased the determination and resolve of the hunger strikers and their supporters. Just 2 days after the death of Bobby Sands, Joe MacDonald began his hunger strike, and by the end of the month, he was joined by Martin Herson, Kevin Lynch and Kieran Doherty. Protests intensified across the north and across the world as efforts were made to prevent any further deaths. Tensions also increased on the streets and a number of people lost their lives during the hunger strike. On the 8th of June, Thomas McElwee joined the hunger strike 3 days before a general election was held in the south. Several hunger strikers and protesting prisoners stood in the election, and Kieran Doherty was elected as TD for Cavan Monaghan and Paddy Agnew for Louth. And the by-election which followed the death of Bobby Sands showed that public support was not merely an emotional reaction when his election agent Owen Corran was elected with an increased majority. Michael Devine joined the hunger strike on the 20th of June as protests and demonstrations in support of the prisoners intensified. As the hunger strike continued, the scale of the tragedy in the H-blocks of Long Kesh was shown to the world with the death of each hunger striker. After the death of Bobby Sands in May, Francis Hughes died, followed by Raymond McCreesh and Patsy O'Hara the same month. Joe MacDonald and Martin Herson died in July. Kevin Lynch, Kieran Doherty, Thomas McElwee and Michael Devine died in August. All died as political prisoners. They gave their lives selflessly for their comrades, for what they believed in, and for the Republican struggle. They did so with courage, dignity and determination. Their sacrifice is remembered and respected throughout Ireland and across the world today, 40 years on.
When apples still grow in November, when blossoms still bloom on each tree, when leaves are still green in December, let's send that our land will be free. I wander her hills and her valleys, and still through my sorrow I see a land that has never known freedom, and still only our rivers run free. I drink to the death of her manhood, those men who would rather have died than to live in the cold chains of bondage, to bring back their rights were denied. Oh, where are you now that we need you? And what burns where the flame used to be? Are you gone like the snows of last winter, and still only our rivers run free? How sweet is a life but we're crying, how mellow the wine but we're dry, how fragrant the rose but it's dying, and how gentle the wind but it sighs. What good is in youth when it's aging? How much joy is in eyes I can't see, when there's sorrow in sunshine and laughter, and still only our rivers run free, and still only her rivers run free.
According to 40 years ago, 10 young men gave their lives on Hunt's freedom. Theirs was a feat of incredible courage, principle and love for their country. The impact of the hunger strike and Bobby Sands MP and Kieran Doherty TD went far beyond the aim of defeating Thatcher's criminalisation policy. The hunger striker was a watershed in modern Irish history and for politics on this island. It forced the international community to take notice of the brutality and oppression of Britain's occupation of Ireland. The hunger strikers were visionaries. They were change makers. Lying starved and brutalised, they looked beyond the four walls of their prison cells and to the prospect of their own death, to a better future for everybody, free of conflict and injustice. And today, their sacrifice stands as an inspiration for us all, to continue on the path towards the goal for which they gave their lives, a new and united Ireland. A century on from partition, Irish unity is the best idea for the future of our island. We've made huge strides on this journey. The Ireland of today is very different from the Ireland of 1981. We have peace, we have political and social progress. Ireland is changing, and a new ambitious generation is rising to claim their future. We now have an environment in which the unity debate can happen in the spirit of respect and understanding. Tá córó faoi éire aontaithe beo I ngach shráidbhaile, baile agus cathair in Éireann. Even those who once only considered a united Ireland to be the noble dream of idealists now see unification as a practical necessity, as the very best way for Ireland to fulfil our potential in the modern world. Because unity makes sense, economically, socially and politically. And it's not a question of if there will be a unity referendum, it is only a question of when. As momentum gathers pace, I'm also conscious that there are those who remain unconvinced by the case for unity. And this includes, of course, those from a unionist background and those whose identity is British. The best way to underpin the peace, to generate peaceful transition, to achieve peaceful change is to plan, to include and to engage. And we owe it to all our people to start this process and this engagement now. Nowhere is the onus to plan for change greater than in the office of An Taoiseach and in number 10 Downing Street. But sadly, the Irish government continues with a lethargic approach to unity based on narrow electoral interests. And in London, Boris Johnson's government has responded with belligerence to the impulse for change in Ireland and with open hostility to the desire for a future based on a reconciled past. We've seen this aggression with the Tories' ongoing assault on the Irish Protocol. We see it too in the shameful attempts to close down investigations into past British actions in Ireland and offering amnesties to their military. So my message to the British Prime Minister is that this is an act of gratuitous bad faith. It won't quell the demand for truth and justice, far from it. Agus seasan Sinn Féin go dtéann lena jowlaí agus a trid in aghaidh rialtas na Breataine an bailach ar fad. I urge Mr Johnson and his government to turn away from this path, because the people of Ireland have had enough of British governments sowing division on our island. We move forward in the belief that we can reconcile our people, that we can heal wounds, that we can lift each other up, that we can leave the jaded collision between green and orange behind in the past where it belongs. As we mark the 40th anniversary of the hunger strike and the centenary of partition, it is undeniable that Brexit and the pandemic reshaped the conversation on a united Ireland. But so too have the bread and butter matters of everyday life. Ordinary people look at their lives and see that the partitioned Ireland of 2021 doesn't work for them. An affordable home is a pipe dream for far too many. Far too many struggle to access healthcare and vital treatments. Our rural communities still feel ignored and left behind. And our young people, bursting with talent and energy, are locked out too often from opportunity. An entire generation is being forced to relive the same problems that confronted their parents and their grandparents before them. And this is the price paid by the people for Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil to cling to the power they have held on to for 100 years. But we know this isn't what people want. They voted in huge numbers for something different and for something better. So when that clarion call for change sounded loudly and clearly at the last election, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael rallied to the flag of the status quo. They clubbed together to block change, to keep Sinn Féin out, to prevent ordinary people finally having a voice in government. So Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael can block change, they can delay change, but they cannot and they will not stop it. Because this new generation has not given up on the Ireland so poetically envisaged in the proclamation. They know they deserve better. They refuse to be held back. They will not allow their future to be squandered. And now is the time for new political leadership willing to match the ambition of this new generation. Now is the time to deliver a fresh start for our people. Now is the time for a new Ireland. And Irish Republicans must be to the fore in shaping this future. We know that it is through activism that we will advance the cause of a new Ireland. Activism rooted in our communities, in togetherness, in each person working for the common good. It is really about being change makers in our time. The hunger strikers were ordinary people, but they were convinced that the contribution of every Republican could change the world, and they were right, as were Ashe and McSweeney, Gahan and Stagg before them. Friends, activism is everything. It is incredibly powerful to face each day and say, I will look beyond my own circumstances and I will look to the greater good. 40 years ago, imprisoned in tiny cells, tortured and convicted, the hunger strikers did just that. They looked beyond the hellhole of Long Kesh to the promise of a new Ireland. And the most fitting tribute we can pay to Ireland's hunger strikers from all generations is to achieve that dream. Éire the co-onanas, an Ireland of equals, a home to all, regardless of identity or background. A place where nobody has to give up on their aspirations or their hopes. We look forward with enthusiasm and ambition to the day when we will have a true republic, a 32-county republic. We are the generation that will unite Ireland, not only in territory, but in spirit, in community, and in friendship too. So the future now beckons. That future is ours. Let's seize it together. An Phoblacht Abu.
Sin aligra la tough we allegerin bui and arsu hearty and radnik who nacht a hymns a varn a foil, Ligan ar gale hon bosh no sel, Ligan a screw, Fwe la wana bile.